Again, more acquisition plan objectives, deploying excess cash. We sure know that with $2.7 trillion out there, deploying excess cash, which is a nice problem to have, is a key part of what we're going to see in deal flow over the next 14 to 16 months. Next. Again, more acquisition objectives. I don't want to just read these to you. I was just listing out different reasons why companies develop an acquisition plan. Same thing there. Let's go to the next slide. So these are now some of the more specific pieces of the plan. What's the target size of the acquisition candidate? What's the source of acquisition financing? You know, what will the financing model or business model be of each acquisition? What method will we use for finding candidates? If we're going to be hiring intermediaries, have we factored the costs and investment banking fees to be charged by the intermediaries into the economic model? What are our desired financial returns or operating synergies? This is, again, can be very deceiving. Many companies lay out a series of operating synergies and then unfortunately do not accomplish them. I would look at both quantitative and qualitative objectives there and make sure that if you're not going to be able to kind of prove out a full-blown quantitative thesis, that there's at least some other qualitative or softer intangible assets to be acquired, whether it's systems, know-how, training, distribution channels, all the things that are talked about in the new book. Minimum and maximum ranges of acceptable revenues, growth, earnings, net worth of the seller. Again, you're trying to paint that picture of the ideal candidate, and then as that picture is painted, of course you want to be opportunistic, but you don't want to be so opportunistic that you are swaying from the plan. Next. The impact the acquisition will have on existing shareholders, and I would actually change that word from shareholders to stakeholders. I'll certainly change it in the next draft, but the point being that it's broader than just your shareholders or dilution rates. You know, what will the acquisition impact be on our customers, on our employees? How will it be perceived? Will it necessarily be perceived as well as we think? I mean, how many times have you seen in the stock markets a company announce an acquisition and then the acquiring company's stock goes down? And everyone says, wow, it's going to be dilutive, not accretive, and it's going to be expensive to integrate. And, you know, I know this may sound naive, but I would think that if we spent millions of dollars analyzing a company and we think that company is truly worth acquiring and then it's going to add long-term shareholder value, I don't expect my stock to go down $5 a share when I announce that we're making an acquisition. I mean, you know, we'd like to have enough trust in the management and leadership of the business that if we announce a major acquisition, we think it's going to drive shareholder value, but rarely does the market reward the buyer and agree. You know, it's often either neutral or negative. Who will be the likely competing bidders for qualified candidates? So, you know, don't ever assume you're the only one in the marketplace, that there's going to be competitors, direct or indirect competitors, that may be going after those same candidates. Who will be the members of the acquisition team and each of their roles? That goes back to Juan's question about, you know, who gets involved, what roles do they play, how soon do they get involved? And those questions, as we talked about in the last webinar, also apply to the seller. You know, who knows what when was a question I asked in the September session. And even though that's a little bit less applicable to buyers, it still could be, you know, if I'm the senior vice president of a division and I know that my company is about to make an acquisition in that division, I still may have some, you know, human fear, emotion, trepidation about whether or not I'm still going to have a job. Now, in many cases, I've been told that an acquisition is going to be made. I'm part of the acquisition due diligence team. I'm not hearing it through the rumor mill, you know, but I still may be wondering on a post-closing basis, will I be in charge of this bigger division, or might we acquire a company that's got somebody that's more capable than myself? So we still have to factor into the the acquisition plan a little bit about how will the news be perceived, both internally and externally. What are the types of risks that you're willing to assume? Back to hot potato again. You know, if a company, for example, do you have an appetite for distressed companies, for turnaround situations? Some companies are really good at that. Some companies, quite frankly, stink at it. You know, they're not a turnaround or troubled company. They don't have a lot of experience with distressed companies, and they shouldn't be out there buying distressed companies, no matter how attractive the valuation is. It's a little bit like the people who take in the injured dog or the injured bird and nurse them back to good health. Some people are really good at that, and some people aren't. If you're not good at nursing that bird back to health and letting it fly again, you shouldn't be on the buy side of distressed acquisitions, because they're going to take some nursing to get healthy again. Even if you think you can sprinkle your very profitable magic fairy dust on them, and that overnight they'll start buying into your systems. Those companies are sick and underperforming for a reason, and it's important to understand that reason and to make sure that you have the capabilities of fixing it. The desired geographic location of the target company. You know, how far away are you willing to travel? Are you familiar, in the spirit of cross-border transactions, with the culture and the language and other variables that will influence whether or not that acquisition is a success? Some companies are very good at cross-border deals and acquisitions and integration. Some companies should probably buy just from their own backyard. You know, there might be a company based in Philadelphia that thinks buying across the river in New Jersey is geographically diverse, and if that's their mindset, then they should probably stick to the Mid-Atlantic region as opposed to starting to buy companies in California or Singapore, where life may be very, very different. What are the desired demographics and buying habits of the seller's customers? Now, this is an important point from an integration perspective. You know, if you are Tiffany and you know, your first acquisition was Gucci, and you very much understand the demographics and buying habits of the high-end customer, and then suddenly you decide to buy, oh, I don't know, Elizabeth, help me out. What would be the equivalent of Tiffany and Gucci in the fashion world?
Target, TJ Maxx.
Yeah, so you go out and you buy TJ Maxx. I mean, you know, that's a very different shopper and a very different consumer, and that consumer is not attracted to the light blue box the way that your Tiffany customer is. And, you know, do you really have the knowledge in the marketplace, even if this is a diversification play, which makes sense, but do you really have the knowledge in the marketplace to integrate a marketing strategy around a very, very different set of customers than you have? Again, if the acquisition is driven by diversification, you may have no choice but to learn that marketplace, no matter how distasteful you find the clothing coming out of those markets compared to the high-end stuff you've been selling, or vice versa. There have been some low-end consumer sellers that have tried to go high-end, and you know, even some of the larger retailers that have tried to offer a high-fashion line have failed, and that wasn't even through acquisition. That was organically. Another huge issue in your acquisition plan, your plans to retain or replace the management team of the target company. You know, where does that fit? How does their comp package and benefits compare to your own? What will that do to your org chart? All of those things are relevant. Next slide.